Great. Yep.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, good evening or good morning to all of you, depending on the time zone in which you live, because there are always people at this meeting from all over the world. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago, a teacher for the past 14 years, and this is the 130th edition of our Zoom public meeting. We wish to sincerely thank all those who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora Global Project. So for 129 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. So for the past 2 years, 8 months, we have featured over 437 presenters from all parts of the world, speaking on 128 topics. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. In order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are asking that you kindly give us your suggestions as well as donations, and you can contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for further details. Ladies and gentlemen, our moderator this evening or tonight is Shalama Mohammed, the co-director of this Zoom platform, who is a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA, and she's a strong advocate for health and wellness practices based on traditional and alternative healing. So Shalama, welcome, and please take over from here.
Thank you very much, Shakira. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Namaste and a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for choosing to spend this part of your Sunday or your Monday morning with us. This public meeting will take the usual form of a panel presentation, followed by questions and answers. To avoid trolls invading our program, Ravin Ramsingh, our IT manager, has muted everyone, and our speakers are advised not to admit anyone, not to unmute anyone, and please do not allow anyone to share your screens. Thank you. Our meeting today should not exceed 2 hours. And while most people are watching Spain versus Germany live, that football World Cup match right now in Qatar, we appreciate you being here to talk about Indian culture, global warming, and the climate emergency. Now, what a timely topic. It's raining heavily here in Trinidad and Tobago. We've had over 6 inches of rain in just about 2 days. And unfortunately, right now, we are suffering from extensive flooding and some landslides. This situation is likely to become the norm owing to climate change. And perhaps it's timely that we raise this issue. You see, the Conference of Peace, COP27, which took place where the discussions were held on climate change, that just finished in Egypt on November 20th. So there were many discussions about the impact to small island developing states, such as the Caribbean and Pacific Islands, as well as the coastal areas of all countries. We, however, would like to focus on what can Indians in the homeland and the diaspora do to mitigate the climate emergency. Social scientists and anthropologists are raising awareness that culture and the arts have the potential to be a driver in addressing our climate crisis. But is it enough? How exactly are Indian culture, philosophy, and lifestyle contributing to the destruction of nature, the environment, and to global warming? On the other hand, we have to consider what are some traditional Indian practices which conserve rather than destroy the environment. Is making the earth, soil, water, and some plants sacred contributing to conservation? These are some of the critical questions that we hope to address today. And as we get started, we want to share a 2-minute video clip from the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, delivering his speech at the COP27. So I'll ask Robin to bring that up now, please.
That when nations come together in common cause, there is always room for hope. I believe we found room for hope in Glasgow, with one last chance to create a plan that would limit global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees. We made the promises to keep that goal within reach. And the question today is this: can we summon the collective will to deliver them? I believe we can. When we began our COP presidency, just 1/3 of the global economy was signed up to net zero. Today, it is 90%. And for our part, the UK, which was the first major economy in the world to legislate for net zero, will fulfill our ambitious commitment to reduce emissions by at least 68% by 2030. And because there is no solution to climate change without protecting and restoring nature, in Glasgow, more than 140 countries, which are home to over 90% of the world's forests, made a historic promise to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by the end of this decade. And just this afternoon, I co-hosted the first meeting of the Forests and Climate Leaders Partnership to ensure this is delivered. Central to all our efforts is honouring our promises on climate finance. I know that for many, finances are tough right now. The pandemic all but broke the global economy. And before coming here today, I spent last week working on the difficult decisions needed to ensure confidence and economic stability in my own country. But I can tell you today that the United Kingdom is delivering on our commitment of £11.6 billion.
So we need money in order to be able to help to fix the problems. But what else can we do? Let's hear from our first speaker today, and that would be Kayleen Moodley of South Africa. She works in the field of environmental management and sciences, and she's pursuing her master's degree in environmental science at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Kayleen, go ahead, please. You have 20 minutes today. Can you unmute, please? Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to know, are you going to share my presentation or would I share it?
The choice. Okay, Robin is.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Namaste, Vanakkam, Namaskaram, and Assalamu alaikum to everybody. Indian culture, global warming, and the climate emergency. Next slide, please. So what is climate change? Climate change, rising temperatures, greenhouse gases, fossil fuels, and global warming are just some of the many terms that we hear so frequently these days. However, what exactly is climate change? According to the UN, climate change refers to the long-term shift in temperatures and weather patterns. Many of these shifts or changes occur naturally. However, since the 1800s, the main driver for the accelerated rate of these shifts are attributed to anthropogenic activities, with the primary driver being the burning of fossil fuels like oil, gas, and coal. So, how are humans responsible for this climate catastrophe? This boils down to demand and supply. There's an increase in demand for resources, and the supply simply cannot keep up. The increase in demand for electricity, food, fuel, and land have all contributed to the factors accelerating the rate of climate change. Next slide, please. The burning of fossil fuels results in the generation of greenhouse gas emissions. These emissions trap the sun's heat similarly to a blanket around Earth, causing the temperatures to rise. Like I previously mentioned, it is the increase in demand that drives this acceleration, with the main industries contributing to climate change being the energy sector, transport, and agricultural sectors. Some examples include the ever-growing population, which leads to the need for land space, resulting in mass deforestation, in turn destroying the lungs of the earth, which are the trees. The need for gasoline and oil for powering vehicles, coal mining for the generation of electricity, and the other contributing factors of climate change being natural causes include volcanic eruptions, ocean currents, the Earth's orbital changes, and solar variations. Next slide, please. One back. So what is the climate emergency? Greenhouse gas emissions are at their highest concentration levels in 2 million years, and these concentrations are exponentially rising. And as a result, the Earth is approximately 1.1 degrees warmer than it was in the late 1800s. And according to data, the last 10 years have been the warmest. How much has the world warmed up already? IPCC scientists agree that temperatures have now risen by at least 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times, but warming is not evenly spread across the globe. On land, temperatures have risen nearly 1.5 degrees Celsius, more than that over bigger, cooler oceans, and the Northern Hemisphere being particularly warmer, with Europe having seen about 2 degrees Celsius of warming and the Arctic 3 degrees. This results in the mass glacial melting that we are now experiencing. Sharm el-Sheikh noted that since the last ice age that ended nearly 12,000 years ago and human civilizations developing, the Earth's long-term average global air temperature has never varied by more than 1.5 degrees above a stable 14 degrees Celsius. But within the last decade, fossil fuels emissions accumulating in the atmosphere and trapping more of the sun's energy are expected to drive global temperatures by about 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is moving past this mark. Next slide, please. Now, you may think that this is a measly 1.5 degrees warmer, but the impact is immense. Climate change does not exclusively mean an increase to temperature, as the Earth is a connected system. Thus, a change to one factor will significantly influence a change on other factors, causing a ripple effect. Some consequences may include intense droughts and severe fires, water scarcity, rising sea levels, flooding, melting polar ice, and catastrophic storms and extreme weather patterns, as well as declining biodiversity. In South Africa, we currently have experienced these extreme weather patterns with localized flooding, and the knock-on effects, especially in terms of economic factors, have been devastating. So why is 1.5 degrees so important? The difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius is the difference between 70% or 99% of coral reefs dying, double the likelihood of, I lost my screen. Sorry about that.
Okay. We are still seeing the last screen, 1.5 degrees Celsius. So would you like to continue speaking to that?
Yes, I just need to figure out how to see the screen again. Oh my gosh. Oh, there we go. The difference between 70% and 99% of coral reefs dying double the likelihood that insects, vital pollinators, lose half their habitat, 1 meter added in sea level rise, and 6 million or 16 million affected by sea level rises in coastal areas by the end of the century. Next slide, please. So what you need to know about the climate emergency. The science of climate change is well established, with climate change is real and human activities being the main cause. The concentration of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere is directly linked to the average global temperature on Earth. The concentration has been rising steadily since the Industrial Revolution. The most abundant greenhouse gas, accounting for 2/3 of greenhouse gas emissions being carbon dioxide, is largely the product of burning of fossil fuels. Methane, the primary component of natural gas, is responsible for more than 25% of warming we are experiencing today, and it is a powerful pollutant with a global warming potential over 80 times greater than CO2 during the 20 years after it is released into the atmosphere. Next slide, please. So what is the impact on human health? There are many research papers that show the negative impacts on human health, such as respiratory illnesses due to poor air quality, waterborne diseases that then flourish during localized flooding. And furthermore, climate change will also affect humans' mind and behavior psychologically. Climate change will affect humans' behaviors in terms of consumption, energy use, and population growth. Climate change will also impact mental health, including stress, anxiety to adapt and cope with the new changing weathers and resulting economic crisis that follow. Next slide, please. Then we get the impact on biodiversity. Climate change will affect biodiversity, which is very important for plants and animals to maintain their habitat and ecosystem. Just a slight alteration to ocean temperatures would have a detrimental effect on marine life. Many organisms cannot adapt fast enough to the changes and often die off, leading to extinctions. For example, the water sources may change, which would result in a change to their food chain, which could destroy many. In addition, research found that the marine ecosystem will not only be affected by an increase in sea temperature, but also ocean acidification, which increases the vulnerability of fragile ecosystems such as coral reefs. This then brings into play the Paris Agreement, which was an international treaty adopted in 2015 in response to the threat of climate change, intended to keeping a global temperature rise this century below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Next slide, please. But has the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming limit already been lost? At the current rate of fossil fuel consumption, there's approximately 7 to 8 years remaining before we pass this mark. To ensure that this does not happen, countries would need to stick to their targets and cut their emissions by half. This may seem like a far cry to achieve, which is why at COP27, it was suggested to have an overshoot of the target. However, this overshoot has to be as small as possible, just a fraction of a degree, and to try to swiftly pull back temperatures. Every increase in global warming matters. In a series of UN reports, scientists and governments agreed that limiting global temperature rises to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius would help us to avoid the worst in climate changes and maintain a livable climate. However, climate change affects every person and every part of the world, but with some countries contributing more than others. The 100 least emitting countries generate 3% of total emissions, whilst the 10 countries with the largest emissions contribute 68%. Everyone must take climate action. However, countries creating greater emissions should have greater responsibility to act first due to having the resources to mitigate these emissions. Next slide, please. How can we mitigate these effects from an Indian culture perspective? Climate change is real and it is happening now. So what are the mitigation measures that can be implemented? As mentioned by the IUCN, integrated management of ecosystems should include the role of culture, as this will meet demands of nature and people to address global changes and improve ecosystems and human well-being. Climate change is without question the defining challenge of our time. No sector is immune from its effects, and this includes culture. But as the former Indian External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj mentions, Indian philosophy, lifestyle, and cultural practices are based on the sciences of protecting nature and holds key to solving environmental issues like global warming. Like many other Asian cultures, the root of most practices lie in living a balanced and harmonized life with our environment. Indian philosophy, lifestyle, traditions, and cultural practices are based on the science of protecting nature. This needs to be explained to the global community. Till a lifestyle based on this philosophy is adopted, solutions to the environmental problems caused by global warming will be elusive. Next slide, please. She went on to note that terrorism is an attack on man by man, while global warming is caused by an attack on nature by humans. In a rat race for development, many developed countries have caused irreversible damage to the planet, and is now expected from developing countries to often bear this brunt and provide solutions, and this is unfair. It cannot be stressed enough the need for reviving cultural traditions that are environmentally friendly. We often hear of indigenous knowledge systems, and this is a must. in mitigation at a local level. Climate change is affecting all aspects of culture, from cultural heritage to natural heritage to livelihoods linked to this economy. Culture is also a source for climate adaptation because cultural heritage, natural heritage, and traditional knowledge all support the resilience of communities to respond to climate change impacts such as extreme weather phenomena. Next slide, please. So this is a portion of a presentation that I had found that explains the link between culture, Indian culture, and the environment. So India is often noted as the birthplace of many religions that cultivate a need for conservation of the environment. It also showcases that Indian culture worships nature, which is seen in many Asian cultures where we take pride in strong links to the environment. Religion protects and nurtures the environment. And if we look at Hinduism, for example, we worship the sun, wind, land, trees, and plants, as well as water, which forms the basis of human survival. It can also be seen in many Eastern art and scriptures where it's showcasing harmony between in the environment and people. Next slide, please. Again, this showcases the link between the Indian culture and the need for to be environmentally to be in harmony. Basically, it shows that. For example, the contribution of the Hindu religion shows the protection of wildlife and natural resources that have been enshrined in the religion and culture and has been stressed, for example, in the Constitution of India. Next slide, please. So the relevance of cultural practices and ecosystem management. The following examples illustrate the potential uses and importance of cultural practices and ecosystem management in conservation and climate change adaptation. You could start off with the basic assessments of cultural conservation practices in different ecosystems of the world that have highlighted the relevance of understanding and supporting local and traditional knowledge when biodiversity and cultural diversity have never been more threatened than now. You can also look at the real solutions to address and impacts of climate change and biodiversity conservation that require a knowledge and insight from social sciences, specifically the role that culture plays. For example, culture influences your consumption decisions that may impact species or contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. And culture influences how people would support or oppose responses to mitigate biodiversity loss or climate change. Next slide, please. We face a huge challenge, but already know many solutions. Many climate change solutions can deliver economic benefits while improving our lives and protecting the environment. We have many frameworks in place that can guide us on this, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Paris Agreement. There are three broad categories that tie this all together, being cutting emissions, adapting to climate impacts, and financing required for these adjustments. As mentioned earlier, we need financing to implement these changes. So we could switch energy systems from fossil fuels to renewable energies, and this will reduce the emissions driving climate change. But we have to start right now, which is why it is developed countries that should be taking these initiatives, as it is far more difficult for developing countries to make these changes. Therefore, adapting to climate change consequences protects people and their homes, businesses. Adaptation will be required everywhere, but must be prioritized now for the most vulnerable people with the fewest resources to cope with during climate hazards. Next slide, please. Traditionally, modern ecosystem management was driven by scientific or conservation ethic. This has sometimes led to conflict between culture and conservation. But more importantly, or more recently, there has been a strong recognition that effective ecosystem management can only be achieved through a better understanding and integration of the relationships between communities and nature. The challenge, however, is that in a changing global environment, some of these long-held practices can lead to degradation of the ecosystem, and others can play a very relative role in promoting biodiversity conservation, but also in helping societies to address the impacts of climate change. Cultural systems shape the way that people interpret climate change and provide a historical and socio-cultural context within which impacts are experienced and responses are generated. Next slide, please. Some actions that can be incorporated to include culture in addressing climate change. You enhance understanding of cultural practices that impact on or contribute to biodiversity conservation and ecosystem management, and the cultural knowledge and value systems that underpin these practices. You increase knowledge of the role that cultural practices play in climate change impacts, mitigation, and adaptation, and how culture can contribute to improve human responses to climate change in an integrated manner. You can assist the development of tools and guidance to understand this relationship. And lastly, promote the development of policies that include and support the role of culture in ecosystem management for biodiversity conservation and climate change mitigation and adaptation. Next slide, please. So, in conclusion, despite the fundamental relationships between culture and climate change mitigation and adaptation, culture is largely absent from this conversation. Culture is not always integrated into frameworks such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Paris Agreement. So a way in which government could address this is by integrating these factors. And as the former Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon notes, climate change does not respect borders. It does not respect who you are, rich or poor, small and big. Therefore, it is what we call global challenges, which require global solidarity. In conclusion, we can see that there are many effects of climate change that seriously affect our environment, health, and biodiversity. We can learn from traditional cultural practices that emphasize living a sustainable lifestyle, that it is imperative to act now and make changes so that future generations do not suffer. Next slide, please. I would like to conclude with a quote by the former president, Mr. Barack Obama, that emphasizes the need for urgent action in addressing climate change. No challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change. We're the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, and we're the last generation that can do something about it. We only get one home, we only get one planet. There is no plan B. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kayleen. That was a very comprehensive presentation. You've summarized the topic quite nicely. And you pointed out that India really, the Indian religion, main religion, Hinduism, really focuses on protection. But at this point in time, the Indian government is really pushing adaptation. So let's see how far that goes and whether or not it does indeed help. I want to thank you very much. We will be taking some questions from the audience for you and for all of the other presenters, and those questions will come at the end of all of the presentations, okay? Thanks again. Ladies and gentlemen, our second speaker now is Mr. Ritesh Sarju of Suriname. He's the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Spatial Planning and Environment. He's also a part-time lecturer at the Anton de Kom University and the Polytechnical College of Suriname. Welcome, Mr. Sarju. You can go ahead and present for 20 minutes.
Yes, I cannot share.
Okay, we are not hearing you clearly.
I think Rabin has allowed him to share.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Able to just go ahead and share.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you now. Go ahead, please.
Yes.
Would you prefer if Ravin shares your screen?
Share, okay, I can share.
You
That's
can?
No problem.
Okay.
Yes, he said he can share.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
It's coming up.
Can you see my screen?
It's asking you to double click to enter full screen mode.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet. Okay, now we are, yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Namaste, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to try to because my colleague before my presentation gave a very comprehensive overview about climate change and the impact that climate change can have. So I will skip that so that we can wait some time. From the Sudanese Indo-cultural point of view, I will try to give my presentation on this regard. Next slide. First of all, I will give some facts about Suriname. Suriname, as you all know, is located on the northeastern Atlantic coast of South America. It's bordered on the west side, Guyana, or to the south, it's Brazil. To the east is French Guyana, and in the north, it's the Atlantic Ocean. Suriname has a population of approximately 600,000 inhabitants. The ethnic groups and the cultural groups in Suriname is Indians, and is approximately 28%. Maroons are approximately 22%. Creoles are approximately 16%. And what in the Caribbean, this is unique in the Caribbean, is Japanese Indonesian community, which is 14%. This is some facts from Suriname. I just going to mention the focus areas of Suriname's climate change policy. First of all, when we talk about climate change, it's important to focus on climate data, which is very important because the vulnerability is there and we have to understand what is happening on the ground. For that, we need high quality data. Climate change is a very complex story. We need capacity to ensure that we are able to tackle all those issues that we are suffering and going to suffer the coming period. Mitigation is a very important part of our policy. That's why it's important to create policy which promotes low carbon emission. Although it's also important to mention that Suriname is still carbon negative, which doesn't mean that we don't have policies regarding mitigation. We have our NDC, National Indeterminate Contribution, which states, I think, portfolio, it has a portfolio of 18 projects, mostly mitigation projects. Reducing vulnerability and building resilience within different sectors and different communities. We have our national adaptation plan, which is very important. Also very important is raising awareness across the country, what the impact can be when it comes to climate change. Very important for us also because, as we know, we are the 6 countries. Although we don't contribute a lot when it comes to greenhouse gases, we will suffer, and we are suffering a lot because of the effect of climate change. Sea level rise is one of the issues. So the need of internet resources is very important. And of course, the mainstreaming of our policy, the climate change policy within the National Development Planning is very important. Just a quick scan of what the impacts are and can be when it comes to climate change. there are different districts in Suriname, and it's important to mention that when it comes to climate change, we'll have a decrease of freshwater availability, intrusion of salt water in the rivers and aquifers. The flooding and drought will increase, pollution of surface water resources, coastal retreat, damages of coastal infrastructure, and decrease, for example, of biodiversity, in this case, the turtle nestling sites. When it comes to building resilience, we have, as I already mentioned, our National Adaptation Plan, which focus on, which has two approach. It's focused on 6 strategic components and also 12 sectors. For example, when it comes to strategic components, it focuses on institution, capacity building, data and information. When it comes to sector, it focuses on water, agriculture, forestry, mining, energy, and so on. Our adaptation priorities on national level is also mentioned in our adaptation plan, and I have highlighted point 5, which stated that climate change adaptation that respect Surinamese society and culture and reduce gender and social inequalities. Very important to mention that besides all those technical stuff that we have to do regarding data, institutional arrangement, we have stated in our national adaptation plan that we want to create a policy which respects Surinamese society and culture. And when we further elaborate on this, in our adaptation plan, it is mentioned that we should focus to identify the social behaviors, norms that have both positive and negative impact on climate change. Very important to understand that, because at the end of the day, it's humans that's polluting and humans activities that bringing this climate change issue on agenda. So it's important to understand the community. It's important to understand their culture. It's very important to know what they are thinking and how they handle when it comes to sustainability. I just want to focus on Surinamese Indo culture, and I have to mention that Suriname is a multicultural society. We can learn a lot from all those different cultures, and when it comes to the Indo culture, it's important to mention that one thing which I've learned is that you should always it's very important to know that we should always be human, manur power, which means that become the person who is able to discriminate the right and wrongs. And as we are recognized that we are similar souls, a very important statement within the Indian culture, because if you have the capability to discriminate between right and wrong, you will always try to act in a sustainable way, so that you will not harm ecosystems, you will not pollute in a way that that our environment and our climate will impacted by that. We have always respected our parents. In our culture, our parents has a very high place. Always said that on earth, our parents are God. Dharti, which means earth, has the status of Mata, which means mother. And this is very important to mention that, because it's a philosophy that we respect Mata a lot, mother a lot. That's why when it comes to Dharti, when it comes to our earth, Mother Earth, we should respect her as we respect our mother. It's important. That's why we should never overexploit the resources that Mother Nature gives us, and we should act in a sustainable way so that the generations after us can also enjoy what Mother Nature is providing us. One other thing is that we have always learned that we should always try to consume sattvic food. And why I'm putting this on agenda, and I'm not promoting that everyone should be vegetarian. I'm also not vegetarian, but it's when it comes to total emission, approx 14.5% of the all anthropogenic and greenhouse gases comes from livestock. So when we will consume less meat, it means that we can also contribute on mitigating the greenhouse gases. The last point that I want to mention is what I have learned from the Indian communities, that they always invest in strong communities. I've been in 2018, I was in New Orleans, and we all know that in 2005, there was a hurricane called Katrina, and the aftermath was terrible. And the post-Katrina period, this was very terrible. They identified that the community, we all know those issues in New Orleans, the community was very, very weak. And because of the fact that the community was very weak, we're not able to tackle the issue, the post-Katrina issue. That's why it's very important when it comes to climate event, we have to invest in the communities. And that's what I've learned from the Surinamese Indo culture. This is my last slide, and I want to thank you for your attention.
All right, thank you very much. That was very short and very much on point. So it was very interesting that you would have pointed out all the ways in which Indian culture would have been promoting protection as well as sustainability. The key thing, though, is we are now at this point. So is it that much more of Indian culture by way of sustainability should have been emphasized to the rest of the world? Is it being practiced in India sufficiently? Because the point at which we are at suggests that enough has not been done in terms of observance of those practices. So I look forward to hearing your responses at the end in the Q&A. Thank you very much, Sue. Ladies and gentlemen, we now hear from our next speaker, who is also from Suriname, and this is Professor Max Wiesden, the Department Chairman and Head of Labs in the Department of Environmental Science at the Anthony Com University. He is also a board member of Water Forum Suriname. Go ahead, sir, you can present for 20 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Your mic is muted. You're unmuted now.
Yes. Good day, everyone. Let me see. I have two devices, so I have to turn one off. I had one as a backup because we have a bad thunderstorm in the background, so I was anticipating maybe losing power. But so far, so good. Good day, everyone. I'm going to present about the topic of climate change within the context of Suriname. The previous speaker already introduced the country in a certain context, but then I will just briefly touch on the following topics. Next slide, please. Suriname is known as the greenest country on earth. That is not only propagated by us. Next, please. But it's also been presented in several international and well-established organizations. Greenest country means, of course, that we have about 93% of forage coverage. Next, please. But that is not our only strength. We appreciate our environment very much. It is our greatest asset and our biggest value. But water is also one of our very important topics when it comes to preservation and the environment. To put this in context, I need to tell you that about 97% of all water on Earth is in the form of salt water in the ocean, which is not readily usable for household purposes. About 3% of all water is in the form of sweet water, which is readily usable. But unfortunately, about 2.5% is in frozen form, which leaves about half of a percentage that can be used by households, which already tells you how important water is within the context of the environment and sustainability. Next slide, please. So Suriname is part of the Amazon region, which means that we have, by definition, a very rich biodiversity, not only, but our cultural content is very diverse. We have people from all over the world living in peace together, which is unique for Suriname. We also have sweet water, and we have 93% forage coverage, like I already told you. Next slide, please. But we are confronted with an international situation where climate change is changing the world. If I present Suriname to you, you would think this is paradise on earth. But a lot of countries are being actually confronted with extreme weather events. One of the topics that is in the news often is the temperature on earth. If you look at the various decades behind us, we see that about a steadily increase of countries that are suffering of 50 degrees centigrade. And this is steadily increasing. And it's not only for a few days. We see that nowadays it can last up to 1 or 2 months. 1 or 2 months at 50 degrees centigrade is almost an unbearable situation where life cannot sustain. And this is happening more and more frequently. Next slide, please. If you look at the occurrence of earthquakes, we can use this slide to show you where the tectonical plates come together. Next slide, please. And in this image, you can actually see how these tectonical plates have caused for extremely heavy earthquakes in the past decades. And the red dots, the circumference actually indicates the strength of such an earthquake, and the color actually depicts the depth of the earthquake. So in Suriname, you see that we are pretty much shielded from most of these disasters. Next slide, please. Also, extreme weather events in the form of precipitation has caused for flooding in many areas of the world. As you can see in this brief picture, that this has taken very extreme forms all over the world. Next slide, please. Yet, Suriname is being shielded from these extreme weather events because during hurricane season, historically, we see that most of the hurricanes take a path that goes west and north. So most of the hurricanes actually turn away from our country. Next slide, please. Nevertheless, Suriname is being threatened by climate change. As presented by the previous presenter, we have seen that the coastal area of Suriname is very flat and is not very high above sea level. And especially water accumulation causes a huge threat in the context of sea level rise. We are being struck by numerous floods during the year. Next slide, please. Please continue. There are several more. You can just keep clicking, because what I tried to show you here is a collage of several pictures of the beauty of Suriname. So on the one hand, stop please. On the one hand, I have shown you the disasters in globally. On the other hand, I have told you about how we are blessed and shielded from most of those disasters. However, given our sensitivity to sea level rise, especially given our low-lying coastal area, we are very sensitive to this particular aspect, not only due to the rise of sea level, but also salt intrusion causes a big threat. Our coastal area is very fertile, so agriculture can be a very important part of our economical development. But with salt intrusion, this particular pillar for our economy can be threatened. So we are, as a country, at the crossroads. And this means that we can either choose for quick industrial development, which will have a toll on our environment, which I tried to show you that is very important and precious to us. The rainforest coverage, the copious amount of sweet water, and our rich biodiversity. But also, there is already a lot of activity going on, anthropogenic activity that causes us to worry. Next slide, please. Nevertheless, the government is making an effort to protect certain areas in Suriname. We have certain areas that are nature reserves. We have other areas that are nature parks. And this map actually gives you an idea of the large areas that are already being protected and where industrial activities are not allowed. Next slide, please. Next. Next, please. Thank you. Yes, so in our policy development plan, it is suggested that maybe we should think about making Suriname one big nature reserve because of the rich biodiversity that we have and because of the very unique situation that Suriname is thriving under. It is actually one of the last lungs for the earth. So not only is it important for Suriname, it would be beneficial to the entire world if Suriname can be protected and sustained as far as its environment goes. Next slide, please. One of the threats that Suriname is facing at the moment is, for example, through mercury. Mercury is being used in the artisanal gold mining industry, important for our economical development, but coming with a cost. Next slide, please. A huge portion of our environment is already threatened by this use and the pollution caused by mercury. It has a toll on not only the environment, but also on human and floral and faunal health. We see here a map where you can see that the yellow area is the area that is mostly affected by the contamination of mercury. Next slide, please. This mercury actually goes through the mercury cycle, which means that when the soil is being disturbed, mercury vapor gets into the atmosphere. And when it gets into the atmosphere, it will be transferred into a polarized form of mercury. It can then dissolve in water and return to Earth in the form of metal mercury. And this metal mercury that is being created by little plants, plankton, can actually enter the fish cycle and then enter the human consumption patterns. So we have done some research. Next, please. We have done some research to bring into view the different sources of mercury contamination. Next, please. And we have looked at the various, actually the various ways that mercury can enter the human body. And one of the important ones is through the consumption of fish. And in one of the studies that have been peer-reviewed and published, we show that especially predatory fish can play an important role as far as contamination and toxicity in humans, in people that live in Paramaribo or capital city and surrounding areas. Next, please. Another threat to our environment is the economical development in the sector of oil and gas. I'm not saying that oil and gas is necessarily a bad thing for us as a country at the moment, but it does contribute a lot to our carbon dioxide emissions, and it contributes significantly as a whole to climate change in general. So oil and gas is not necessarily the best, nor is it sustainable development for Suriname's economy. Next, please. Nevertheless, we see that there is a lot of activity going on in our coastal waters. Guyana and Suriname alike have been in the center of the economical interest. A lot of big oil companies have centered in our waters to explore and to get ready for exploitation of crude oil and oil products. Next, please. These are some of the headlines that I just want to share with you. Next, please. So, as head of the Department of Environmental Sciences, I have an important role together with my team. We try to partner with international organizations and with government agencies to try to protect our environment, to protect our health, and to protect our biodiversity. And in this context, next, please. One of the sustainable ways, the previous one, please. One of the sustainable ways is to develop a natural medicine from our rainforest. As I told you in the beginning of my presentation, Suriname is a country, the greenest country on earth, with 93% forest coverage. We have a huge pool of possibilities as it comes to bioactive molecules that actually can sustain and help restore health through natural means. So this can be like an industrial pillar for Suriname to thrive on. It is a very big industry internationally, and I think that if further developed, it could be sustainable and it could benefit not only Suriname but the entire world. Next, please. And just to trigger you to maybe ask some interesting questions about how we can develop this type of area in the context of a sustainable way for nature, for health in general, I'm showing you this picture where the aging process can be broken up into several topics, where aging can actually be seen as a disease, where every disease has a cure. So within this context, one of the topics that we research in my department is how we can prevent aging or even reverse aging. And this is not something that is impossible. There is scientific evidence that shows that, especially within the context of integrative medicine, meaning the allopathic medicine combined with natural medicine, where those two come together. And I know that within the context of today, where we talk about Indian culture, Ayurveda plays a very special role within this entire field. So maybe in the questions and answer session of today, there might be some questions that I would like to shine some light on. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Max. There were many things that you said that was very interesting, and I think this statement, Suriname is one of the last lungs for the earth. I love that. So very true. And I just want to say that we will be seeing this very last lung of the earth come August next year.
I finished my presentation. Back to the host.
Yeah, thank you. So we've been hearing you, and I was just complimenting you on that excellent presentation. And I wonder if you had heard me say that I loved your statement, Suriname is one of the last lungs of the earth. Very, very good. We will be seeing that very last lung of the earth come August of next year when we come to Suriname on our ICC tour. So we hope to meet with you all then, both the PermSec as well as Professor Max. We would love to meet with you all. And of course, we want to join you all and have a greater discussion about how Ayurveda can be maximized in Suriname. Now, we do have an excellent friend in Dr. Amrika Anrod, who's an Ayurvedic practitioner there. And of course, Amrika will be there with us. We will be seeing him at some point, possibly not every single day, but we will definitely be taking some people to his practice. And Professor Max, as you are on, why not just give us an idea as to what it is in Suriname that can be maximized for Ayurvedic purposes and to be used in the nutraceutical industry. You can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to meeting you all as well. America is a very close friend to myself, and we are actually together in the board of a presidential committee for putting together the industry of an integrative medicinal practices in Suriname. So I'm looking forward to meeting you. To answer your question, there is actually so much potential within this area that I cannot pinpoint one or two items. There is a whole lot of potential, and I mentioned that Suriname is a country very rich in various cultures, and all of these cultures have contributed to the anecdotal evidence of medicinal values of various crops. Not only the crops, but also non-timber forest products. And I already mentioned that we have as being part of the Amazon region, we have a very rich biodiversity as it comes to plant material in the rainforest. And all this actually contains bioactive molecules that can be used for medicinal purposes. But of course, it's a big challenge because, as you know, you have to do research first and you have to validate these products. So the validation is one of my biggest challenges that I'm facing happily. I'm also head of the laboratory, and we are gearing up to do research and validate some of these products to start with. Also, we are preparing to establish the necessary law products to form a foundation for this this industry. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, and you've opened the door for more. So now I want to find out. So Indians have traditionally been using things like neem. How much of that is actually going to be used in the products that you're creating and other similar plant products?
Yes, like I mentioned, there are so many options, but the important thing is that we create the right infrastructure first to validate all those claims. I must say that a lot of scientific work has already been done within the context of Ayurveda. You know, one of the assignments that we have as a presidential committee is to look at traditional medicine in general. So this is a very wide topic, and we have on the one hand the allopathic medicine, which is the Western medicine as we know it. And we have on the other side, we have the natural medicine, the traditional medicine systems. And one of the big players within the natural medicine systems is the Ayurveda, because the Ayurveda already has a lot of scientific research done and we can build upon. So when a neem is one of the examples, which has already been researched. So our assignment is to look at the local usage and the local validation of this product, among others.
Yeah, excellent. So we look forward to being able to come across Suriname to get our Ayurvedic products rather than having it imported from elsewhere. So excellent work. We look forward to hearing more about that as you all go further. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any raised hands at this point in time. So I just want everyone to know that Kayleen Woodley from South Africa, unfortunately, is having some technical issues. And so if it is that you do have some questions, please post them to us so that we'll be able to send to her via email perhaps. So at this point in time, who we have PermSec Ritesh Sarjo and Professor Max to take any questions or concerns that you may have. I just wanted to raise something else having to do with Suriname. I was reading an interesting article having to do with the green economy and infrastructure that is being put in place, essentially to separate hydrogen from oxygen in a water molecule and use that hydrogen in order to replace natural gas to power plants and so on. And I understand that there's a project taking place in Suriname at this point in time. Trinidad and Tobago has only recently started. Well, I don't know how far we've gotten to, but we've started on that. But Suriname, I understand, has it established already. So perhaps PermSec Sarjo could share some information about that, possibly.
Yes, good afternoon once again. Can you hear me clear? Because it's raining a lot. So
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay. That project, as far as I know, it's on hold. There were some issues. So I think that project is it's not right on this moment on track. So yeah. So what when it comes to renewables, right now the government and the private sector is investing a lot in solar panels. It's important also to mention that because of the fact that we are carbon negative, our focus is more when it comes to an adaptation. We focus a lot more on adaptation because of the fact that sea level rise is a major issue will be a major issue in Suriname because of the low lying state of the coast. And of course, we have the hydro power plant, which is also generation. I think generating 40% of our electricity is coming from the hydropower. So that's what we have when it comes to renewables.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. We have a question from Dr. David Subran, and he's asking if there are Indian cultural practices which negatively affect the environment. So can either one of you speak to this question as to what is happening in your country in particular? Professor Marx, would you like to take this? Are there Indian cultural practices which are negatively affecting the environment?
Yeah, maybe I can start, and Professor can talk.
Certainly.
Yeah, yeah, there are some practices, like I don't want to say it's a culture or more regional stuff. When, for example, I was working at the Ministry of Public Work, I think in the past, and I was at the Department of Drainage. And one issue was, like, like Indians, when they do their puja, they what we call sarwave. After the puja, they throw everything in the river. You you have like all those flowers and everything, you have to throw in the river. So like Ganga, like you give it to Ganga. But what they do in our country is like they use like different kinds of plastics and so on during the puja and everything. Everything is they throw everything in the river. So that's one thing I say, can we pollute? You should throw all those organic materials, but not plastic and so on. That create a lot of issues in the marine ecosystems and so on, like plastic and so on. So I think that is one thing we should yeah, we can do better when it comes to our activities, religious activities and so on.
But if it's the flowers and so on, that's organic. So eventually it should break down. Is it happening to such a large extent that it is clogging
It's also
waterways and
plastic.
so on?
Yeah, it's also plastic. So they throw everything.
But some plastic as well.
As well. So it's not, when it comes to organic material, it doesn't matter because, but when it comes to plastic and the sewer systems and everything, like the drainage pumps and everything, will have issues. So that's one thing I think we have to invest, is that we have to educate our people on the ground and tell them, listen, you can go and throw your flowers and everything, but don't throw plastics in the rivers, because it's harming the environment. You do a puja for your well-being, but don't harm Mother Nature.
Right. Yeah. So thank you very much for sharing that. I'm also seeing in the chat that there are some comments, and I'll read this for the benefit of those who are on YouTube right now. If anyone is interested in the climate, they should take a deep dive into the science associated with predictions arising from climate modeling. Excuse me, specifically the impact of CO2 emissions on global temperatures. One notable person who disagrees with climate predictions is John Christie from the US. Scientists should have a critical look at his claims. Okay, so Katal Hilly Singh, would you like to expand on that, please? We don't have time to open the YouTube video, but is there a point that you would like to make, which you can speak to? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, I guess, in Trinidad. No, I myself have, yeah, I just started the video there. I've been an environmental engineer for many years, 30 years now, practicing around the Caribbean, and had been very much involved in climate finance and very familiar with Suriname and Guyana. But I recently came across a few years ago, the climate science and the impact of CO2 on global temperatures has been something that I think we all sort of readily accepted. it particularly where it comes to predictions. And the IPCC predictions are quite dire in terms of, you know, if we don't make these reductions, then the temperatures will increase to these amounts. And I myself began looking at the models, which are very complicated, and then came across this guy Christie's work, where he has looked at all the models, and his claim is that they exaggerate the implications of the rises in temperature. And you know, science is something that is not fixed in stone. It's something, as we know, that is always dynamic and must be open to challenge in order to preserve its own integrity. And Christie's work is particularly interested, and I only put it there because I see that there are technical people here who are obviously very interested in the subject. And it was quite an eye-opener reading his work. So yeah, so that was the purpose of presenting that. He's basically saying that you know, models are made up by assumptions on what's happening, and what he has done is look back at some of the data which can be proven because time has passed, and the earlier predictions he claims were way off, and that's essentially his point. So that's why I wrote that. But just on another note, very quickly, I just wanted to point out in Trinidad, you know, I've attended several shavings and rivers where family members have passed. And, you know, normally at the end of the puja, the hair, you know, in Suriname and Guyana, rivers are very big. But in Trinidad, our mountain rivers, I'm thinking about Cora River, for those of us from Trinidad, where shavings happen routinely. We know that a little walk downstream from that area, you come across the Cora water treatment plant. And I was amazed to see a carpet of hair matting the intake screen of that plant, you know, completely covering it several inches thick. And I had pointed out to the Pandit that, and he put the hair in a bag and take it and discard it somewhere else. So I'm just making that point that, you know, where rivers are supposed to be protected for reasons that their intake for drinking water supplies, Hindu rituals involve hair cutting, it would be a good idea not to discard the hair because they do create problems at the intakes for water treatment plants. It might sound like a very small point, but I did just want to mention it in addition to the point I made in the chat. Thank you.
No, it's a significant point. We appreciate that. Thank you. So I think the thing about it is some religious practices over the period, or some practices have become religious because they happen all the time. It's what people do. But if it is that we are saying that we are going to be doing things to please the Almighty, well, I'm not too sure if anybody has read that cutting the hair, throwing it into the river pleases the Almighty, and that's something probably that we need to consider. Whether this is just happening because it's a normative practice or whether it is something that is actually related to some metaphysical something. So thank you very much for sharing that. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, it was remiss of me to mention to you all that we should have had our fourth speaker, who would have been Mr. Kishan Kumar Singh, and he actually would have represented Trinidad and Tobago at the COP27. We would have loved to hear from him today. Unfortunately, at the last minute, he was unable to make it. Having just returned from that trip, he's unable to speak to it at this point in time owing to some other immediate commitments because he only just returned. So unfortunately, we will not be hearing from him today. I'm still not seeing any hands raised to ask any questions. So at this point in time, I just want to say thank you very much to our three speakers, Kayleen Moodley from South Africa, Permsec Ritesh Sarja from Suriname and Professor Max from Suriname as well. We really appreciate all the information that you shared, and we want to thank you all as well as our participants for spending this time with us. We hope to be able to at least have people think about what we in the Indian diaspora do and whether or not we are being helpful or harmful to the environment. It's so important for us to consider those things at this point in time. So let me bring this session to a formal close, and I will now hand you over to Shakira, the chair. Thank you very much, you all.
Thank you, Shalama. And thank you all for taking the time to participate. And thank you especially to the speakers. As I've said before, this public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. And you can feel free to contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir at the ICC to publish your books and reports. Remember that we are asking you to kindly give us your suggestions as well as donations. And you can also contact Dr. Mahabir for further details. We want to thank the advisory and planning team led by Dr. Mahabir. And also thank you to our IT manager behind the scenes, Ravin Ramsingh, who has been recording the program and will edit and upload it to our website and to YouTube permanently for posterity. Our topic next Sunday will be part 3 of our conversations with elders. And we definitely are looking forward to that. So please like, share, and follow our Facebook page. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago saying goodbye, and may God bless you all. Dhanyavad.